Hello and welcome. If this is your first time visiting, please be sure to check out my other repair videos. To support the channel for free, all you have to do is subscribe, comment, and like. Now let's get on to today's video.
Hello and thank you for joining us. If this is your first time visiting, then I really appreciate you guys loaning me your eyeballs for a few minutes, and I hope you'll do so in the future. Today we're working with my 2000 Honda Accord. I have a series of videos where I rebuilt the engine of this car, and if you watch those, then this is going to actually pertain to some of that as well. If you watch those videos, then I appreciate you trusting me that I gave you good information on how that is done so that you don't make any mistakes. Also, if you've been watching recently with the 2000 Accord, you know that I've had a series of idle issues that I've been chasing down, and I can't seem to find the problem in it. Now, the last video that I put up, at the end of the video, which I did not show, had a severely overheating engine, and that was a new symptom for the idle issue as far as I'm concerned, which brings us back to the whole point of the repair videos. Now, after the engine overheated, when I did that video, the last video that I did, I pulled the radiator and I lost a lot of coolant. I refilled it, and I was probably around a half a gallon. Now, the problem with this car actually using the coolant like it did, I did not realize it was doing it until it overheated. There was no coolant on the ground. You check the oil, there's no coolant in the oil. So that coolant had to go somewhere. If it's not in the oil and it's not falling out of the car, the only other place it can go at is the exhaust system in the vehicle. So what I did was I pulled the spark plugs out of it. I took a look at them. Everything looks good. I'm not too concerned about that. But I'm thinking back to when I actually did the head, when I installed the head on this car, the head gasket. There's a lot of things that happened in that video that I did not show. Now, trust me that the information that I gave you is the correct way to do that. Where my problem came in, and which was edited out on the editing room floor to make us YouTubers look like we're gods and we know everything about everything. So with the engine on the stand, as you're trying to apply torque to it and you're trying to hold the engine, you know, every action has an opposite equal reaction, and you're turning and the engine's trying to go in the opposite direction. And I had some places where I had to stop and back up. And during the stopping and backing up of this, I got confused where I was in the process, and I was not happy with it. Now, these are torque to yield bolts on the heads on these cars. So once those things are actually to the point where they're torqued down where they're supposed to be, they're really shouldn't be used again. So if you back it up and you try to go again, you're not going to get the same amount of torque that you had before. So after I actually got this engine put back in the car and everything cranked up and ran fine, I was always worried about how I put the head down on this car. Again, the video I showed you was exactly how you do it, except for if I were to do it again, I would get the head on and get the first stage done, and then I would put the engine inside the car, and at that point I would have done the torque procedure with supported by the car, so that way you don't have to be fighting it while it's on the engine stand. So what I always told myself is that if I had a problem later on, the first thing I should do to address that problem is go ahead and pull the head and put a new head gasket in it, get new torque to yield bolts, and get this thing down with it in the car like I should have done the first time. Now that we have these idle issues and now that I have an overheating issue, I'm not 100% certain that the head gasket is the problem. I could buy one of those block testers to put on the radiator that actually sniffs the radiator fluid, the antifreeze, to see if there is exhaust gas inside of it. I could do that. But since I have always been suspicious of how I put the head down and have always kind of had that in the back of my mind, if something were to come up with this car, I have elected to go ahead and replace the head gasket in this car. So this is pretty much the first video of the head gasket replacement series for this, while the engine is actually inside the car. Now, when you go to replace the head gasket in this car, the one thing that has to happen, it is the number one most pain in the butt thing that you are ever going to do with a Honda engine, is remove the crank bolt. So this video today is just going to concentrate on the crank bolt that's in the Honda engine. Notoriously tough to get out. Different types of tools and procedures and methods and things that you can do to do that. I'm going to show you how I did it with hand tools. So after watching this video and you're a little unsure or you're a little bit worried about it, So what I suggest that you do, if your vehicle is still drivable, before you take anything off of it, take it to a mechanic shop, whatever, and ask them to back the crank bolt out of it, and then just put it back in just enough for you to get it home. And you will understand shortly why that is the case, because these things are a pain in the butt. There's if you've ever done a transmission on one of the older Hondas, like a D or B series engine, with a manual transmission, there is a thing in the shifter linkage where a pin holds the linkage to the car and it goes through. I know that looks a little lewd. That pin is actually known in the Honda world as a bitch pin. And I would say that the crank bolt on the Honda engine should be known as a bitch bolt as well. That is my belief on that. So I'm going to show you on the bench here. I'm going to show you a couple different ways that you might be able to get that thing off with what you may have at your disposal already. But if you only have hand tools, stick around. I'm going to show you how to do it. All right, the first thing to know about the Honda crank bolt is 19 millimeters. And this is just a standard 19 millimeter impact socket. Now this is a battery powered torque wrench. This is a mid-range 18 volt torque wrench. You may get lucky, put your impact on it, and just rattle it off like that. If you have access to an air compressor, with 125 pounds of air pressure in your system and a really good air impact wrench, you may be able to back that off and you'll be good to go. If that does not work for you, the next step that I would suggest would be this guy right here. This is a 19 millimeter weighted impact socket designed specifically for the Honda crank bolt. The company named Leslie, I'm not exactly sure how to pronounce it, makes this thing. You can get them on eBay for about 20 bucks, or Amazon as well, and there is a part number for that. You put this on the end of your impact wrench, of course, and you back it off. It has a lot of weight and mass. This thing probably weighs about 3 pounds. It's the heaviest impact socket you'll ever pick up. Get that on the end of your, what I would suggest is an air impact. Again, about 120, 125 pounds in your system, and you will probably get this to back off. That will probably be the end of it, and you're good to go. If you don't have access to impact wrenches and compressors and that tool, then what I suggest you do is the following. All right, now in order to do this with hand tools, you will need a way to lock up the harmonic bouncer inside of the car. This is a tool that you can get from Napa, AutoZone, any of the stores like that, and it's a Honda or Acura harmonic bouncer tool. As you can see, this shape here fits inside the harmonic bouncer, and it still provides you a place to put your socket through to get onto the nut. You hold this, you put a breaker bar onto this, and you jam it up so that prevents the harmonic bouncer from turning. If you're going to go that route, this is the Napa version. That is the part number for it right there. It's about 50 bucks. So it's about the same as the weighted impact that I showed you a minute ago. Now, even with that, to show you what can happen, and this is why you should use tools that have a lifetime warranty. Here we have a Craftsman half-inch drive extension. You can see there, my first attempt, I actually broke that. That's how much force you have to put on this to get this to come off of the crank itself. And so this, I'll run this back down to a Craftsman dealer, and they should hand me another one. There should be no questions asked. All right, let's move on to the rest of our arsenal here for tackling this job. All right, these are the tools that I'm going to be using to get the crank bolt off of my car. I don't have access to the air compressor and air wrench that I used to have before I had to downsize when I moved here last year. Now this is MAP gas. You could probably get away with just plain butane, which is in a blue tank. This burns hotter, and so it's a little easier to warm things up with it. This will cost you around 45 bucks to get the actual can itself and the igniter and torch end that goes on top. After you buy the kit, then these things are not, they replace the actual gas itself is not too terribly expensive. The second thing that I'm going to use is a Craftsman half-inch drive socket, and the reason I'm going with this one, this is a high quality, and also it has a lifetime guarantee. So if you break this, Craftsman's going to hand you another one, no questions asked, because there is a chance that you will break this. I'm also using Craftsman a half-inch drive extension. I also have to use a smaller extension, which I'll show you when I get it to the car. And then this is a Tecton 19 millimeter impact socket at the end. This is a breaker bar. This is my Tecton 1/2-inch drive breaker bar. And finally, this is the end of one of my jack handles. Just comes off the end, and I'm going to use this as an extension for my Craftsman wrench to put as much force on this bolt as I possibly can. Okay, and in addition to the hand tools I just showed you, I'm also going to use a jack stand and a block of wood. The block of wood is just so I can have a little more height on the jack stand, so that when I'm putting all of this onto the crank bolt itself, this will be supporting it as I'm twisting or putting torque on it to try to get it off. All right, let's move over to the car and show you what we got. All right, guys, as you can see, I have the car supported with a jack stand, of course. I know if you watch my videos, you may get tired of me saying it. Please do not die underneath your car. That would be terrible. With the car up and supported on the jack stand, what you'll need to do if you still have it is your inner fender needs to come out. It's a piece of plastic that will go around all of this, and it would prevent you from actually seeing the crank on this car. Mine got ripped out I don't know how long ago. I've been running this thing for quite a while without it, so it hasn't caused any issues for me. And also I have all my tools here ready to go. The bouncer holding tool, my setup for the 19mm ratchet, my map gas, my jack stand, and a piece of wood. So what I'm going to do is get the camera set up, and I'm going to show you my setup for getting this crank bolt out. Alright, the first step is going to be to get the bouncer tool onto the piece. So I'm going to come in with it like this. I've already kind of got it set, as you can see, where there's a flat spot there at the top, and that's going to work. Alright, with the tool on, you can see I still have it where this is the breaker bar is still loose, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to shove that until it's underneath like that. And once you have that set up like that, I'm going to come in with a hammer. I'm going to make sure that I have that as flat as I can get it onto the balancer itself. Alright, with the tool in place and locked down on the ground like that, I'm going to go ahead and crank up my map gas off camera here. There you go, lock it in. I'm going to hold that on the crank bolt. I'm going to hit my watch, and I'm going to give that 2 minutes. Alright, there's 2 minutes right there, and I'm going to try to work quickly and show you the next part get set up for it. Alright, I've got the jack stand now in line with the crank bolt with my block of wood. I have a block of wood on it just to raise it a little bit higher, and I'm going to come in with my setup with my 1/2-inch ratchet now and get that actually onto the bolt and lay it across the wood like that. And this is going to support as I push down here. It's going to keep this, I'm not going to have to use another hand to hold this side up. Alright, just another angle to show you my setup. And now what I'm going to need to do next is I'm going to put this jack handle over the end of my ratchet. Alright, gentlemen, with everything set up now, this is exactly what I'm looking for. The jack stand is over the 1/2-inch ratchet. I have the extensions as straight as I can get them, supported by the jack stand. And now I'm ready to put as much pressure on the back of this jack handle as I can to get it to break that loose. Now, when you go to break this loose, one of 3 things is going to happen. Either your whole assembly is going to slip and fall apart, you're going to break something, or you're going to get that bolt to break loose. And when that bolt breaks loose, it will feel like you broke something if it was that hard on there, which most of these are. So just keep at it. If you break something, replace it, keep at it again. That's unfortunate, but that's how these crank bolts are on this vehicle. So I'm going to go ahead and put the pressure on this and get it broke loose. Ta-da, I'm loose. The secret is that I already had that broke loose before I filmed to make sure I had it ready to go for you guys. Once you finally get that to come loose, or if you broke it and you've gone down to the store to get you other parts to replace what you just broke, and you came back and you heated it back up and you broke that thing loose finally, keep in mind, don't touch anything. That is extremely hot back there. I would not reach in there for at least a good 15-20 minutes. Once everything's cooled off, of course, get your tool out, and oddly enough, it doesn't even take a wrench anymore. It's just that first 1/8 of an inch turn. It's nearly impossible. with this SOB, the Honda crank bolt. So there you go. All of that set up and equipment just to get this one bolt off of the Honda. This is notorious. You search for this on YouTube, you'll see it everywhere. So there you have it. That is the number one step before you do anything, is get that crank bolt off of that car. Because if you can't get it off, you've already torn everything off of it, and you have to take it somewhere to get that thing pulled off, then you're going to have to put everything back together, of course, and get the car to where it needs to be, or you'll have to tow it. So at any rate, I appreciate every single one of you who joined me today, and trust that I'm going to give you the right information on how to work on your vintage Honda Accord. See you on the next video.